China's $250 billion infrastructure investment in the region has focused on enhancing commercial ties with Latin America. The effect of these investments on bilateral trade and long-term economic growth prospects must be considered as both parties attempt to strengthen their economic connections. With its infrastructure investments in Latin America, China hopes to boost trade, lower trade barriers, and expedite the movement of products and services between the two continents. These advancements will probably lead to considerable rise in trade volume and a diversification of traded goods, which will ultimately promote economic interdependence and mutual gain. Furthermore, Chinese investments are anticipated to boost Latin American industries' competitiveness by giving them access to cutting-edge know-how and technologies. This technological transfer may boost Latin American countries' export capacities, productivity, and value-added production, further boosting trade growth. Opportunities for commercial collaboration outside of infrastructure projects are also presented by the improved trade relationship between China and Latin America. Through enhanced connectivity and common interests, cooperative initiatives in the agricultural, manufacturing, and service sectors can be encouraged, resulting in synergies that advance economic growth in the area. It is crucial to take into account any potential difficulties that can occur as trade partnerships grow. It's important to carefully consider issues like trade imbalances, reliance on the export of raw materials, and the impact of Chinese economic swings on Latin American economies. Furthermore, it's important to closely examine how greater trade would affect Latin America's income distribution, social welfare, and environmental sustainability. A key component of China's $250 billion infrastructure investment in Latin America is technology transfer and innovation. The infrastructure industry in the region has the potential to benefit from the introduction of cutting-edge technologies and innovation fostered by Chinese investments, which would ultimately boost economic growth, productivity, and global competitiveness. The direct involvement of Chinese companies in the development and management of infrastructure projects is a key method of technology transfer. These companies frequently contribute state-of-the-art engineering know-how, cutting-edge project management approaches, and cutting-edge technology that can improve the overall efficacy and efficiency of infrastructure development. Latin American nations will be able to pick up on and use these techniques and technology, which will enhance the capacities of their domestic infrastructure over time. Chinese investments can boost innovation within the local infrastructure industry by fostering competitiveness and encouraging research and development in addition to direct technology transfers. Chinese enterprises may encourage domestic firms to enhance their goods and services, adopt new technology, and make research investments in order to remain competitive. Additionally, partnerships and joint ventures between Chinese and Latin American businesses can promote knowledge sharing and the creation of novel, regionally relevant solutions. By generating new employment possibilities, fostering workforce development, and influencing labor standards, Chinese investments in the infrastructure sector of Latin America have the potential to have a considerable impact on local labor markets. To make sure that the advantages of infrastructure investment are widely distributed and contribute to inclusive economic growth, it is crucial to examine these factors. The generation of jobs is one of the most direct and immediate advantages of Chinese investments on infrastructure projects. Large-scale building projects necessitate a significant amount of labor, creating both temporary jobs during the construction phase and permanent jobs in the maintenance, operation, and related industries. Particularly in areas with little economic possibilities, these new jobs may assist to reduce unemployment and underemployment. Chinese investments can support the growth of the labor force in Latin American nations in addition to directly generating jobs. Chinese businesses can contribute to the development of local expertise and enhance the skill set of the local labor force by bringing cutting-edge technology and construction methods. Investments in apprenticeship programs and vocational training facilities can also aid in the creation of a competent labor force that can fulfill the demands of the increasingly complex infrastructure sector. However, it is critical to take into account any potential difficulties brought on by Chinese involvement in regional labor markets. The use of Chinese labor that may restrict local workers' employment options and impede the transfer of knowledge and skills is one of these difficulties. There might also be challenges with regard to labor standards, such as issues with pay, working conditions, and labor rights. To protect worker welfare and advance decent work in the region, it is crucial to make sure that the Chinese investments comply with local and international labor laws. Significant geopolitical ramifications result from China's large infrastructure expenditures in Latin America, which reflect strategic goals that can affect local and global power dynamics. Understanding the bigger picture of China's expanding regional influence requires looking into these goals and any potential effects they may have. Securing access to essential natural resources such as minerals, oil, and agricultural products to support its expanding economy is one of China's main strategic goals. China can improve its long-term energy and food security while diversifying its supply chains by investing in infrastructure projects that allow the extraction and transportation of these resources. Extending China's political and economic sway in Latin America, traditionally seen as the U.S. sphere of influence, is another strategic goal. China seeks to forge tighter connections with Latin American nations and counteract U.S. influence in the region by offering financial support and encouraging economic independence. As a result of this interaction, China's Belt and Road Initiative may receive more support from international organizations and platforms. The emergence of a multipolar world order may also be aided by China's infrastructural expenditures in Latin America. China's growing worldwide influence challenges the supremacy of traditional Western countries, especially the United States, and changes the balance of power in the world. With numerous centers of power vying for influence, a more varied regional landscape may result from China's expanding influence in Latin America. However, there may be worries and potential conflicts as a result of these geopolitical ramifications. As both countries look to increase their influence in Latin America, tensions between China and the United States may worsen. As China's influence grows in the region, concerns regarding the long-term viability of its investments and the possibility for debt reliance among Latin American nations may also arise. When assessing the effects of China's infrastructure investments in Latin America, debt and financing are important factors to take into account. To make sure that these initiatives contribute to long-term economic growth without escalating the region's debt vulnerabilities, it is crucial to evaluate their financial viability and debt consequences. Large capital expenditures are common in infrastructure projects financed by China, and loans from Chinese policy banks like the China Development Bank and the Export-Import Bank of China are the main source of funding for these projects. While these loans can help with the building of much-needed infrastructure, they could also lead to higher debt levels in Latin American nations, especially if projects don't yield enough returns on investment. Concerns about debt sustainability can emerge when nations amass excessive debt, which makes it harder for them to fulfill their repayment responsibilities. Long-term growth prospects can be undermined by high debt levels because they can reduce available fiscal resources, restrict policy alternatives, and make a country more susceptible to economic shocks. Unsustainable debt may occasionally result in debt restructuring or default, with potentially serious repercussions for both debtor nations and their creditors. Governments in Latin America, Chinese investors, and other stakeholders must establish responsible debt management procedures and guarantee that infrastructure projects are financially feasible in order to address these debt and funding issues. This can involve carrying out thorough cost-benefit evaluations, choosing initiatives that will have a positive economic and social impact, and structuring loan arrangements with advantageous terms like low interest rates and lengthy repayment terms. China's investments in Latin America must include both regional integration and interconnection of the infrastructure. Understanding these investments' broader effects on economic growth, commerce, and social development requires looking at how they contribute to the creation of interconnected transportation, energy, and communication networks throughout the region. Building ports, roadways, railways, and energy infrastructure are just a few of the infrastructure projects China is working on to improve connectivity within and between Latin American nations. These investments can facilitate the flow of people, goods, and services, lowering logistical costs and fostering regional trade by enhancing transportation networks. Enhanced connectivity can also help regional value chains integrate, enabling nations to take use of their comparative advantages and boost their competitiveness in international markets. Energy infrastructure investments, such as those in power plants, transmission lines, and energy corridors, can aid in the integration of regional energy markets and advance energy security. The establishment of a more sustainable and diverse energy mix that includes renewable sources can result from this integration, which can also enhance access to affordable energy resources and improve energy allocation efficiency. The region's access to information and communication services may also be improved by China's investments in communication infrastructure, including as fiber optic networks and satellite technologies. In this area, improved connection can promote innovation, aid in the expansion of digital economies, and reduce the digital divide between urban and rural areas, ultimately promoting social and economic progress. Chinese investments in Latin America's infrastructure sector have the potential to have profound social and cultural effects, changing the region's social dynamics, local communities, and cultural landmarks. Understanding these influences is crucial for determining the larger effects of these expenditures and ensuring that they support equitable and sustainable development. Infrastructure projects financed by China may have a direct impact on nearby communities, both favorably and unfavorably. On the one hand, stronger infrastructure can result in better access to necessities like education, healthcare, and transportation, improving quality of life and societal well-being. Additionally, the project's ability to create jobs and improve the economy can assist reduce poverty and promote regional development. However, when land acquisition or resettlement is necessary, infrastructure projects can also result in eviction, social unrest, and the loss of local communities' means of subsistence. Large-scale projects can also lead to social tensions and conflicts over resource allocation, land use, and perceived unfairness in benefit distribution. Another major factor is how Chinese investments may affect places of cultural heritage. If not adequately planned and managed, infrastructure projects can result in irreparable harm to historical sites, archaeological sites, and other cultural assets. Sustaining cultural heritage is essential for establishing social cohesion, sustaining a feeling of identity, and boosting tourism and sustainable development. Furthermore, it is critical to support openness, responsibility, and social inclusion in the design, execution, and administration of infrastructure projects. Stakeholders may support social cohesion and foster amicable relationships between Chinese investors and local communities by making sure that the advantages of Chinese investments are fairly distributed and that any negative effects are handled.